At my wedding, my parents called me a gold digger because my husband is wealthy. I turned to them and said, I bought his engagement ring. Check the receipt. The room fell silent. My 32 female husband Julian 35 male and I got married 6 months ago. At our wedding, my parents, especially my father, made an uncalled for comment in front of everyone, implying I was marrying for money. I confronted them, revealed I had proposed and bought Julian's ring with my own savings. Things escalated. It's been months, and I haven't spoken to them since. Now they want to talk, but I'm still angry and unsure if there's a relationship left to save. Julian and I were sitting on our back porch the other evening. The sun was setting, throwing this lazy golden light across the yard. He had a beer in hand, and I had my feet tucked under a blanket, sipping tea. We weren't talking about anything big, just work stuff, weekend plans, what to plant in the garden this spring. Then he said, I still think about that moment. When you pulled out the receipt. That was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. I laughed, kind of. Yeah, well. I didn't plan that. I just snapped. I know. That's what made it so damn good. That moment, my wedding day, is etched into my memory like someone carved it into stone. But to understand why it happened, and why it still haunts me half a year later, you have to know the story behind it. I grew up in Scroon Lake, a small town in the Adirondacks. It's beautiful in a postcard kind of way, snowy winters, lakes that look like glass in the summer, but also stifling. People there don't change much. Families stay for generations. Kids often take over their parents' jobs, or move one town over and do the same thing they watched their uncle do for 20 years. It's the kind of place where people love to keep score. My parents, Jeanette and Dale, weren't bad people in a traditional sense, but they were hard. Rigid. My dad worked in maintenance at the local high school. My mom was a nurse at the regional hospital. They paid off their house in 30 years, never bought anything on credit, and looked at people with money like they were some different species. When I got a scholarship to SUNY Geneseo, I thought they'd be proud. But they mostly seemed confused. What do you want with philosophy? My dad had said. You gonna sit around thinking about trees and get paid for it? I think in their eyes, anything that wasn't physical labor didn't really count as work. So I learned to stop sharing. I moved out. Graduated early. Found work at a marketing firm in Albany. For a few years, I just floated. Paid rent. Took freelance jobs. Spent evenings overworked and weekends trying to feel like someone with a future. I didn't date much. I didn't really live. I just existed. Then I met Julian. We met at a panel at an indie theater downtown. The topic was AI and creativity, how artificial intelligence was changing the landscape of storytelling and art. He asked a question from the audience that actually made the panelists pause, and I turned around to see who had spoken. He smiled at me when I did. Afterward, he found me in the lobby. You looked like you were going to correct the moderator, he said. You should have. That turned into coffee. Then dinner. Then late night walks and early morning texts. He didn't come on strong. He listened. He remembered things I told him. I'd say something small, like how my mom used to make these lemon bars every Christmas, and 2 weeks later, he'd show up with lemon bars from some specialty bakery, saying, I know they won't be the same, but I thought of you. We dated for 8 months before I saw his apartment. Not because he was hiding it, but because he never made it a thing. He came to mine, we cooked together, or walked around the city. Then one rainy Sunday, I suggested I come to his. He hesitated. It's kind of a mess, he said. It wasn't. It was a minimalist penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I tried not to stare. But the real kicker was when I opened his fridge and saw imported cheeses and champagne I couldn't pronounce. Julian, I said slowly, what do you actually do? He told me then. Private equity. Early stage investing. Healthcare tech startups, mostly. His father had been a venture capitalist. His mother, a classical pianist who also came from old money. I froze. Suddenly, our slow-burn romance didn't feel like something out of an indie film. It felt like I was part of a con I didn't realize I was playing. I had this full-body wave of shame and disbelief. Not because he was rich, but because I wasn't. And I knew how the world would see me if they found out. He must have noticed. He sat beside me and said, "I'm not hiding it." But I didn't want it to define us. We stayed quiet for a while. Eventually, I exhaled. I didn't think I'd ever have to Google my boyfriend to find out if he's richer than God. He smiled. "Please don't Google me. I'm really boring on paper." Julian never treated money like a barrier. He didn't try to control me with it. He still let me pay for dinners when I insisted, and he never mocked the way I clipped coupons or bought groceries in bulk. But I couldn't shake the dread that my parents, especially my father, would twist this. So I didn't tell them much. Just that I was seeing someone. Later, that I was engaged. I didn't tell them I proposed. I didn't tell them I saved for the ring myself, 1 month at a time, until I could afford it. I thought if I kept the details light, maybe they'd behave. I was wrong. Our wedding was at a restored barn in Hudson, New York. Rustic, elegant, small. We invited 60 people, close friends, a few colleagues, and immediate family. Julian's parents were generous but didn't try to control the planning. My parents, well, they didn't help at all. They didn't offer money, time, or even input. I figured maybe they were just staying out of the way. I didn't realize they were stewing. The ceremony was beautiful. Golden leaves, a soft breeze, candlelight dinner. We had our first dance, then sat down for speeches. Julian's sister, Mira, gave a sweet toast. My best friend told a funny story about us pulling an all-nighter in college. People were laughing. It felt warm, honest. Then my dad stood up. Uninvited. He didn't even take the mic. Just lifted his glass and started talking from his seat. "I just want to say," he began, slurring slightly, he'd clearly been drinking, "we never thought we'd see Marissa here. Marrying a man like this." Silence. "She's always been determined," he continued. "Ambitious, maybe too much. Always chasing bigger things. Well, I guess she finally caught one." He raised his glass again, a tight smile on his face. My mother didn't stop him. She actually nodded. I couldn't breathe. People were staring at me, at Julian. Some looked awkward, some embarrassed. No one said a word. I stood up. Walked calmly over to the mic. And I said, "Since we're all sharing thoughts, I just want to clarify something." The room held its breath. I proposed to Julian. I bought his engagement ring. With my money. It's a platinum band with a brushed matte finish and an engraving inside that says "Always Forward." I saved for it. 4 months. And if anyone here wants to question why we're together, I have the receipt in my bag. I'll show you. Dead silence. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. But my hands were shaking. Julian stood up behind me and placed his hand on my shoulder. That small gesture, solid, steady, meant everything. I walked off the stage. My dad sat down without another word. My mother looked away. The rest of the evening after that moment was quiet. Not silent in the literal sense, people still ate dinner, clinked glasses, murmured in small groups, but that carefree, celebratory buzz that had filled the room before? It was gone. Like someone had opened a window and let all the warmth out. Julian kept one hand on me the entire night. On my lower back. On my wrist. On my knee under the table. Not in a possessive way, he was just grounding me, like he could feel how close I was to spinning off the earth. His parents were kind. Genuinely kind. After the dancing started, his mother, Eleanor, came and found me near the bar, gently touched my elbow, and said, "You were very composed." I don't know that I would have managed that kind of dignity. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled, tight-lipped. My brother Paul, 2 years younger than me, showed up beside me a few minutes later, offering a cupcake like it was a peace offering. He leaned in and said quietly, "That was a mess, but, damn, Riss. That was baller." "Not really what I was going for," I said, managing a bitter chuckle. "They've been weird about this since you got engaged," he said, glancing around. "Dad kept talking about how you're too comfortable with all of this. Whatever the heck that means." I shrugged. "It means they never thought I'd be someone who got out." Julian and I left before the after party. Neither of us had the energy to pretend everything was fine. We drove to a riverside in about an hour north, where we'd booked a room with a fireplace and a deep bathtub. The drive was quiet, but not uncomfortable. I remember pulling my dress over my head and standing there in the softened light, my hair messy, makeup faded, feet sore. Julian came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and whispered into the top of my shoulder, "You didn't deserve that." I leaned back against him. "I know. I'm proud of you," he said. "Not just for how you handled it. For everything." And I did cry then. Quiet tears. Not from the insult itself, but from the sharp, cutting ache of knowing that this was a line we couldn't uncross. That something in my relationship with my parents had fractured, maybe permanently. Over the next week, neither of them reached out. No call, no text, no email. Not even to ask if we'd made it to our honeymoon. We postponed it, by the way, figured we'd save Bali for a time that didn't feel like we were emotionally concussed. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. An apology? An explanation? Just acknowledgement that what they did was wrong? I got none of that. Instead, 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a forwarded email from Paul. A chain between my mother and one of her church friends. Apparently, the friend had seen the wedding photos on Facebook and asked about it. Mom's response: "It was extravagant. We were not involved in the planning. Julian seems like a good man, but I worry he doesn't really know Marissa." That was it. No congratulations. No mention of love or joy or anything remotely human. Just this cold, distant commentary like she was reviewing a gala she hadn't been invited to. I stared at the email for a long time before deleting it. Life didn't pause for me to process. I went back to work. Julian and I settled into our apartment. We started talking about where we wanted to buy a house, whether we wanted to stay in Albany or go somewhere warmer. He'd just wrapped a big investment deal, and I was leading a rebranding project for a nonprofit client. But in the quiet moments, on the train, in the shower, when I made dinner, I'd hear my dad's voice in my head again. "She finally caught one." Like I was a fisherwoman who reeled in a man and gutted him for his resources. I kept replaying the logic of it. Did they really think I was pretending to love Julian just because he was wealthy? Did they think I'd engineered this? That I'd found some rich guy, pretended to care, and now I was going to, live in a mansion and send them invoices for my affection? It didn't make sense. But then again, maybe it did. If you grow up believing money is always transactional, that having it means you must have cheated or lucked out or stolen it, then maybe love plus money just looks like theft to you. Christmas came and went without a card or a call. Julian's parents invited us to their home in Vermont. It was peaceful and filled with things I wasn't used to: quiet conversations over wine, puzzles on the coffee table, linen napkins that didn't feel performative. At one point, Julian's father sat beside me on the couch and said, "You know, Eleanor and I keep talking about how lovely you are. I hope you're not letting your family's silence spoil that." I gave a small smile. "It's hard not to carry it, even when I know I shouldn't." He nodded. "They might not understand your world, Marissa. But that doesn't make your life less real." In early February, Paul called. Just a quick chat, nothing heavy. But toward the end, he said, "They asked about you." I paused. What did they say? Nothing really direct. Just, if you were okay. If you were still married. I laughed at that. Still married? What, did they expect him to wake up and realize he'd been scammed? I think they're embarrassed, Paul said carefully. I don't think they know how to reach out. They knew how to talk at the wedding, I said. Pretty sure they still remember how words work. He didn't argue. I'm not saying you have to fix things, Paul added. I think they miss you. In their own warped way. That part stung. Because I missed them, too. Or at least, I missed the version of them I used to imagine when I was young enough to pretend they'd change someday. A few weeks ago, a letter came in the mail. Not a card. Not a typed email. A real handwritten letter, sealed with my mother's old floral stationery. I didn't open it. Not yet. It's still sitting in a drawer, under the stack of extra checks and insurance forms and manuals we never read. Julian hasn't asked about it. I think he knows I'm not ready. The thing is, I want to believe people can change. But I also know that sometimes, people just want you to forget, not because they've grown, but because your memory makes them uncomfortable. And I don't know which kind of people my parents are yet. I kept the letter in the drawer for 2 weeks. Sometimes I'd open it, look at the envelope, touch the edge with my fingers, then close it again. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something closer to dread, that quiet emotional tug-of-war between curiosity and self-protection. I was afraid of reading something that would confirm what I already suspected, that my parents weren't sorry. That maybe they never would be. Julian never asked about it, not once. That's one of the things I've come to value most about him. He doesn't pressure me to process on his timeline. He just makes space and trusts I'll get there when I'm ready. Then one night, I had a dream. In it, I was back in our old kitchen in Scroon Lake, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, like I used to before school. My father was reading the paper. My mom was humming at the sink. Everything was still. Normal. But when I tried to speak, nothing came out. I kept opening my mouth, trying to say something, anything, and they just kept going like I wasn't even there. When I woke up, I got out of bed, went to the drawer, and opened the letter. It wasn't long. 1 page, front only. My mother's handwriting was the same tight, slanted script she used on grocery lists and birthday cards when I was little. Marissa, I've tried to think of the right way to reach out. Maybe this isn't it, but it's what I can manage right now. I know you're hurt. I know we said things we shouldn't have. I hope, at some point, we can talk about it. Your father's pride is difficult. Mine too, in other ways. That doesn't make it right. I hope you are well. I hope he is kind to you. I hope you're happy. Love, Mom. No apology. Not really. No ownership of what was said. Just a vague nod to things we shouldn't have said and a subtle pivot to Dad's pride, like it was some generational curse that made them behave badly, instead of a conscious decision to publicly humiliate their daughter. Still, it wasn't cruel. It was cautious. The kind of letter you write when you're not sure you're forgiven, but you're not ready to say you were wrong either. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Life continued. I buried myself in work. Julian and I took a weekend trip to Boston in March, stayed at a boutique hotel in Beacon Hill, wandered around cobblestone streets, bought overpriced lattes, and tried to forget that a wound can still itch long after it stops bleeding. Every now and then, Paul would text me pictures from home. Mom's lemon bars at Easter. Dad fixing the shed. A cousin's graduation. I appreciated the updates, but I didn't ask for more. I still felt detached. Like I was watching my family through glass. In April, we went to a fundraiser for a local arts nonprofit Julian invested in. I wore a midnight blue jumpsuit that made me feel taller than I was. Julian wore a navy suit with a tie I'd picked out. We mingled, drank wine, made polite conversation. A woman approached us, mid-50s, well put together, clearly someone Julian knew through work. She introduced herself as Marianne, a board member. She shook Julian's hand, then turned to me and said, "And you must be his wife. He talks about you constantly." I smiled. "All good things, I hope." She laughed. "Only good. You must be very lucky." It was such an innocuous comment. People say it all the time. But something in me flinched. Not because I wasn't lucky. I was. But because I was tired of the assumption that Julian's wealth, his pedigree, was the best thing that ever happened to me. That I had somehow won by landing him, instead of the two of us building a life we both chose. That idea, "you must be so lucky," had followed me like a shadow since our engagement. It was whispered in compliments. Lurking in family conversations. Implied in every raised eyebrow and passive-aggressive joke. I didn't blame Marianne. She didn't know. But in that moment, I felt the familiar heat in my chest. The echo of my father's toast. The weight of that damn receipt in my purse. Julian saw it, I think. He gently took my hand. I squeezed his in return, grounding myself. Reminding myself who we really were. A week later, Paul texted me, "Mom asked if she could call you." "Up to you. Just giving you a heads up." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to water the plants. It sounds silly, but something about tending to small living things makes my brain feel less tangled. When I came back, I picked up the phone and texted, "Tell her she can. But I'm not promising I'll pick up." The next day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, I listened. My mother's voice was soft. Tentative. "Hi, honey. I wasn't sure you'd answer." I understand why you wouldn't. I just wanted to say I'm thinking of you. And I'd like to talk. When you're ready." That was it. No excuses. No demands. Just a small olive branch. I didn't call her back. Not yet. But I saved the voicemail. And for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. Worn out from carrying a weight that wasn't mine in the first place. Julian and I had dinner that night on the back porch again, same as we had months ago. It was just warm enough to eat outside. We had roasted salmon, salad with lemon vinaigrette, and a cheap bottle of white wine I picked up from the corner store. I told him about the call. He didn't say, "You should talk to her," or "You don't have to." He just said, "How do you feel?" And I told him the truth. I don't know. And I didn't. I still don't. I waited another week before I called her back. It was a Saturday afternoon, raining lightly, the kind of weather that makes everything feel a bit softer, a bit more muted. Julian was out running errands. I was home alone. I made tea, sat on the couch, stared at her number in my call log, and finally hit dial. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello?" I didn't say anything at first. Just breathed. "Marissa," she said again, more carefully. "Yeah," I answered. "It's me." She let out a sigh I wasn't expecting. Like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I didn't think you'd call." "I didn't think I would either," I said truthfully. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Thank you." I didn't respond to that. I didn't call to make her feel better. I called because I wanted closure, whatever that meant. She started talking. Tentatively, like someone walking barefoot across broken glass. She said she missed me. She said the wedding had been beautiful, though she didn't say she enjoyed it. She said she had rewatched the video someone posted online and realized how it all sounded, what Dad had said, what she didn't stop. "I think I was embarrassed," she said quietly. "Not just about that night. About all of it. I didn't understand your life. I didn't know how to fit into it." "And so you tried to tear it down?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to, but you did," I said. Not angry. Just stating a fact. Another pause. I know. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, not on its own. But it was a start. I'll be honest, I told her. I don't know what kind of relationship we can have. I'm not interested in pretending nothing happened. I've spent most of my adult life shrinking myself to make you and Dad comfortable. I'm done with that. I understand, she said. And this time I believed she meant it. We talked for 20 more minutes. Nothing heavy, Paul, the weather, the flowers she was planting. I didn't agree to visit. I didn't ask to speak to my father. I wasn't ready for that. But I hung up feeling like I'd taken back something. My time. My voice. Now here's where the real twist happened. About 2 months later, Julian and I hosted a dinner party. Nothing fancy. Just 6 people, 2 of my friends from the agency, a couple Julian had met through a mentorship program, and a woman named Dr. Ayanna Frost, who ran a tech incubator in the city. We'd been talking about helping her scale the project through an early-stage investment, and she was curious about integrating more marketing strategy into their outreach. The conversation at dinner was lively. Afterward, Ayanna and I sat on the porch while Julian cleaned up inside. She turned to me and said, "You know, you have a gift for this." "For what?" I asked. "Making things feel human," she said. "Most marketing people talk in circles. You cut right to what matters. It's rare." That compliment stayed with me. 2 weeks later, Julian and I sat down and mapped out a new plan, something we'd been toying with for months but hadn't quite committed to. We decided to launch our own fund, focused on women-led creative startups, tech with heart, and family-run businesses from underserved communities. It wouldn't be huge at first. But it would be ours. We called it Anchor and Fire. Julian handled the equity side. I built the brand, the voice, the heart of it. I consulted with founders, helped them shape their stories, refined their pitches. Word got around. Within 6 months, we had 12 clients and were onboarding more. Now here's where the revenge part comes in, not dramatic, not cruel, but satisfying. 3 months after launching, we had a public showcase, a pitch night with local press, regional investors, and a few city council members. We invited a select list of people from both our lives. Julian's parents came. So did Paul. I didn't invite my mother or father. But somehow, they showed up anyway. They stood in the back, quietly, like people peeking in on a world they didn't quite understand. They didn't interrupt. They didn't cause a scene. They just watched. Watched me speak on stage, introduce the founders, tell their stories with clarity and fire. Watched people clap, not out of politeness but because I earned it. At the end of the night, when the crowd thinned, my parents walked over. My dad had his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, face stiff like he'd bitten into something sour. He nodded at me. "You were good up there." "Thanks," I said. "Not warm. Not cold. Just neutral." "I didn't know you did all this," he added. I smiled slightly. "You didn't ask." There it was. The quiet gut punch. The realization on his face that he hadn't just misjudged me, he'd dismissed me. 4 years. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but I turned back to Julian before she could. He wrapped his arm around my waist. "Marissa," my dad said one last time. You don't need to finish that," I said. "We're good." I meant it, too. Not because we were healed, or close, or ever would be. But because I had built something they could no longer diminish. And that was the real victory. Now, every time I walk into our office, past the clean white lettering that spells Anchor and Fire on the glass door, I remember that wedding day. I remember the microphone. The silence. The receipt in my clutch. And I think, this is what I built. Not just a business. Not just a marriage. A life I don't have to defend.